We're going to call the meeting to order. Good evening. Meeting is now in order, and we're going to go out of order of the agenda and do an interview first with Charlene Tallman for GMT alternate commissioner. So, Charlene, come on up, have a seat. Thank you, first of all, and secondly, could you just give a brief description of why you want the position and just a little bit about your background?
I've been living in Vermont since I was 2 years old. That constitutes about 52 years. I've been in Williston for 26 years. My career has been almost entirely public service. I worked as a public safety dispatcher, and then I've been working for Department of Justice for the last 25 years. I grew up in Vermont. It's such a car-based place, and I never even recognized the alternatives to that until recently, when maybe in the last 10 years, as I started traveling outside of Vermont. And I have come to realize, rather like a born again, that we don't have to be entirely car-based, and that public transportation is a public good that helps to keep some of the most vulnerable people in our society from falling through the cracks. And as my kid is finally old enough to not require a whole bunch, I've got a little emotional and time and energy to invest, and I think this is worth investing in. I met Amy Brewer through another committee that we're on, and she shouldn't be the only one holding that flag up, and I would like to do my part to be helpful with that.
Thanks. Questions from the board?
Do you so Green Mountain Transit's obviously going through a tough time. Do you sort of have it's much more fun to be involved in things that are growing instead of shrinking, but do you have sort of a philosophy on how those decisions should be made, or is that something you think you want to learn more about first?
I actually think that's a really important aspect. I know that Vermont has a really huge outlay for public transportation in comparison to other small states and urban areas. I think that's really laudable, but at the same time, I think we need to be really mindful of not letting perfect get in the way of good. And I do think that the plan that they've made, I went to the public outreach meetings, first place I met Amy, and I have looked at the plan, and I do think that they've done a really decent job of trying to pull in the service and make sure that the core service that serves the most at-risk and vulnerable populations is well done. I do think that we have a tendency to like to throw money at problems and not necessarily think through some hard decisions. And I do find that in my professional life, I do have to make hard decisions and balance resources that are limited. And I think I'm pretty good I'm ridiculously logical about certain things. And I think I have the ability to look at balance those needs decently and help guide that. I do recognize they're having to pull in, and I see where those impacts are.
Last time they were here, not last time, last year when Green Mountain Transit was in here, they were talking about possibly rethinking how they would be charging towns, and it sounded an awful lot like Williston may be getting they were proposing, it looked like a fairly large increase for no additional service, which I had to push back on a little bit. So do you think, you're clearly a passionate advocate, do you think that you'd be able to weigh that advocacy with the fact that if we do have to pay more for Green Mountain Transit, something else comes out of our town? Like, our budgets are pretty tight.
That's a really tough one, and it's got to be particularly difficult for Williston, because I don't think that Williston residents use the bus that often. I mean, I ride the bus, I take the bus to work, but it is a pretty big outlay to do that. Williston's central residential core isn't really on the bus route. If you walk from like Finney Corners, you can walk to it, but I don't see other people doing that. So the people who are benefiting in Williston are probably largely the businesses. We do want to bring those people in who need to ride the buses. That's obviously a really difficult thing. One of the things I would love to see Green Mountain Transit do is to try and attract more people who have the luxury of riding the bus. And I think that's going to take a little bit of PR and a little bit of tidying up some imagery and trying to remove some of the stigma of bus riding. But you're right, it's gonna be hard to have the towns invest more. I wonder if there's other ways to do it. I think some of the reductions that they've done to some of the wider services might be a worthwhile start. I think agreements that they have, like with UVMMC for ridership, maybe there's more outreach to find more like that, that could potentially help. But yeah, I think it's a balancing act, and I think that could be hard. Williston has to recognize that they've got to get people into the box stores to work, and the bus does that, but those aren't necessarily the same people who are paying the taxes that would see their bills go up.
Perfect. Yeah, okay, so you understand the.
I understand.
Your good balance.
It is a tightrope.
Ridiculously logical, I wrote that down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good question, good answer.
Right?
The Jeff Ferris question.
That sounds good. Hit me.
We always ask, if for some reason a conflict of interest should arise, how would you identify that and how would you proceed?
I can't really see a conflict of interest arising. I don't have, I'm not a business person. I work in public service. I don't see a lot of conflict between the public service that I do for Department of Justice and for the bus company. But I also know that in the public service I've done for the last 30 years, I've also had to dispatch troopers to neighbors' houses, and I've processed criminal records for people I've known, and I've walked into the court and seen people I've known on the jury, and I've always handled it gracefully and identified it as early as possible and tried to be as transparent as I can in everything that I do. Sometimes, you might know that. You probably already noticed that I have a lot to say. I try to be as transparent as possible, and I would handle it the same way. I would say it as early as possible and take my licks.
If there are no more questions, there is a proposed motion.
I'll move to appoint Charlene Tallman as Williston's alternate commissioner to Green Mountain Transit for an unexpired 2-year term through June 30th, 2026.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. The motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you. I have a
very
new
much.
unpaid job that'll take lots of time. And thank you for moving me earlier, because I'm not usually up past 8. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome,
Thank you very
Charlene.
much.
I assume somebody will be contacting me with what I'm supposed to do next.
Yeah, we'll be in
Awesome.
contact this week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You too. So there is a proposed executive session, a proposed motion to put us into that.
I'll move that we enter executive session to discuss the negotiating or securing real estate purchases or lease options under Title I, Sections 3132 of the Vermont statutes, and invite Town Attorney David Rue and Town Manager Eric Wells to join the discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
There are no nays. We are in executive session. From our executive session, it's 7:56, and we're going to continue on with the rest of the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the minutes from November 19, 2024. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the minutes of November 19th, 2024 with any necessary modifications.
Is there a second?
Second.
Number 5, just the wording under, well, I guess it's technically page 2, but it says the total project cost would be $180,000 to $190,000, making it sound as though that is the all-encompassing cost. Just want to note that the total additional cost for the project is $180,000, and that maybe note that there was already $200,000 of ARPA and $200,000 of grant funding.
Sounds right. Okay. Continuing on page 2. Page 3. Subject to those modifications, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. The minutes are approved. We've already done the, actually, I'm sorry, next on the agenda is a public comment. This would be a time for anybody in the audience or anybody participating remotely to make any comment that they wish. It can be about things that are on the agenda. It does not have to be. If there is something on the agenda that you want to speak to, you may want to wait for that to come up, but again, you don't have to. So is there anybody wishing to make a public comment in the room? Seeing no one. Eric, is there anybody online?
Nope, no one online.
Okay. We've already done the interview and appointment for the GMT alternate commissioner, so the next on the agenda would be the liquor license application for Majestic 10.
Yep.
So,
I've got a application from the Majestic 10 Theater for a first and third class liquor license to serve only, or rather just a first class license for beer and wine. Service will be restricted to an area adjacent to the lobby of the theater. I think I have Larissa from Majestic 10. I think she might be under Merrill's name here. Merrill, I'm going to connect you, I think it's either you or Larissa, to answer any questions from the select board. Nice.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great.
You're on with the select board.
so I'm sorry, this is...
Merrill Jarvis from Majestic
So,
10.
Merrill, I'm Ted Kenny, I'm the chair of the select board. I'm wondering if you could give a little bit of a presentation about the application that you're making and any other information you feel we need.
Okay, yes, I'm Merrill Jarvis, the owner of the Majestic 10 in Williston. And as you all know, the theater business has been really bad for the last 4 years. And it's hard, it's a struggle over there. And theaters across the country are getting extra revenue by serving beer and wine. And I think it's a good idea for the Majestic. The Bijou in Morrisville just got their wine and beer license like 3 weeks ago, and everything is good with them. They have no problems. My brother used to own that theater, so I know the new owner, and they're very happy with what they're getting for revenue from it. And like I said, you know, we need money over there, and so I try whatever I can to generate more cash for the business so it doesn't fail. And then Williston will have no movie theater. I just closed 2 of my theaters, the Palace 9 on Shelburne Road and the Roxy downtown Burlington. That's 15 screens altogether that we don't have in this county anymore. And I would hate to lose this one, but I'm doing all I can to keep it going. And I get a lot of customers that ask for beer and wine, and we don't have it. But I would really like to serve it and let them enjoy their movie with a beer or a glass of wine. The beers and wine will be served to them in plastic cups. We'll open the bottles or whatever, and they'll be carded, and they'll be wearing wristbands. I have cameras in every movie theater and all the hallways, everywhere in the Majestic is being watched all the time. I see no problem with it, and it's a trend all around the country, and I want to get on that train.
So, Merrill, years ago, I think there was a liquor license approved for a part of the Majestic 10 that was kind of a little pub area on the second floor. This sounds like this would be different than that. This would be people consuming while they're watching the movie?
Correct. That restaurant, we tried having a restaurant there up at the Majestic, and it failed rapidly. It was only open for like a month, and we put a lot of money into it and effort and chefs, and people just didn't come. And it's not good for the customers. They won't be happy if they have to go and sit someplace else and not in a theater to enjoy their beer. They're paid for a movie, and to come out of the movie and take 15 minutes to drink a beer or whatever, and then go back into the movie, you know, it's a corresponding event, you know.
Okay, go ahead.
If I may, I asked the state DLC just for their guidance on a movie theater. I can read the feedback I received for the board from Martin Provost there. A theater must abide by the same rules and regulations as a restaurant or bar would have. To be specific to a theater, they have to make sure that the lighting is adequate at all times to see the faces and IDs of their patrons, as well as being able to control the conduct of their patrons. Movie theaters are an added concern to these requirements, as the lighting is, as you may know, much lower. The town may deny the application or impose any conditions on the license that they feel necessary. These conditions would need to be enforced by the town, not the state. That's DLC's guidance on that question.
Okay.
Yeah, the lighting in the theater, it's usually pretty bright in there. I can see all the customers, no problem on the cameras. And I don't see any problem with the lighting at all. It's bright enough.
Questions from the board?
Do you foresee serving beer and wine during all hours that the movie theaters open? Or during?
We open at noon.
You open at noon?
So somebody's having their lunch at the theater, you know.
Yeah.
We have hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken wings. We have all kinds of food there also.
And what's the latest time? Because I think like most of the bars and restaurants in town are closed.
Oh, we won't be staying open late. After the last movie starts, which is around 9 o'clock usually, we start cleaning up and getting ready for the next day. So by 9:30 or so, I would think that there's no more sales.
I'm assuming the sales would be in the lobby area where things were sold now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's okay.
Just a comment for my generation, the movie theaters were date nights. I hate to see all the movie theaters closed, Meryl. I've been going to your movies for about 100 years now.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I feel really bad, especially about the Roxy, you know, because I had a really good crowd there. I had a lot of older people for the art films and independent films. And once COVID hit, they learned something new. They learned how to use their television and sit on their couch. They don't come out like they used to. In downtown, you hear all the things that are going on downtown. It's not pleasant anymore down there. People are afraid to go downtown at night, and I can't blame them.
Staff?
I will say the staff level, we talked about this, you know, we're certainly comfortable with the area in the lobby. I reached out to DLC just for the theater question. Chief of Police just thinking about, you know, these questions about consumption in the theater and, you know, as the owner was speaking to with the lighting and things of that nature. The other component here is thinking about this scenario with wastewater allocation where we do it for seats in restaurants, but if we're allowing consumption of alcohol in a movie theater, do we need to think about that component a bit? I think if the select board is interested in, you know, a concept of having it in the theater, staff might just need a little more time to just review some of these other components and just come back with just a final review of our regulations with wastewater capacity as well, and maybe get some more feedback from the chief of police on any parameters that he'd recommend on some of the service there.
So it's the staff's idea that people are going to drink more beer than the soda they can already get, and that would affect the wastewater?
Yeah, that's a
Okay. That's,
I would think that most people, if the most that they would drink is probably 2 beers. You know, the movie's only an hour and a half, 2 hours long. You know, it's not a party. You know, they're sitting down enjoying a movie. It's not dancing and singing and a pickup place. It's a movie theater.
Attendance.
It's quiet.
When the
It won't be rowdy or anything. And of course, the other day, a patron tried to come into the theater, and he was obviously drunk, and we didn't allow him in. People come drunk sometimes, and we deny him entry. At all the theaters that I've had, we've always done that.
Eric, are you recommending that we could approve the license to serve beer and wine, but that the additional piece for it to be consumed in the theaters, we should hold off on deciding, or should we hold off on deciding the the potential license until all of those pieces are reconciled.
I think at a staff level would be fine with a designated area in the lobby for right now, and, you know, not saying at a staff level would be opposed to in the theater. I think just needing a little more time, I'd want to consult just with the police department just on any particular parameters on this, because it's a different type of consumption area as opposed to a restaurant. And there's a lot of capacity in that facility.
Would staff have enough time if we put this on the agenda for our next meeting as well?
Yeah, we could. I know the board's going to meet Saturday, so, you know, I could get this before you on Saturday if you'd like, just to keep this moving. And we just want a couple more days just to consult with those pieces of it for.
Like I said, the Bijou just got approved in Morrisville, and they didn't have any limitations or anything set against them.
So we could, so the way the motion reads now, it would be just for the area adjacent to the lobby, and then consider that additional.
Yeah, I can come back on Saturday just to,
Yep.
So is there a proposed motion? Is there a motion?
I move to approve a first-class liquor license to the Majestic 10 Theater for a designated area adjacent to the lobby.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Merrill, I think, just so you're aware, we're going to put this on the agenda. We have a select board meeting this Saturday, which is really a budget meeting. But I think we'll put this on the agenda for Saturday as well, because is that okay, Eric? I mean, do you have enough time?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I'll be warning it
All
tomorrow.
right, so that's, you know, that's the agenda. We're not saying no to your idea of serving inside the theater itself. We're just going halfway now, and we'll make a decision for the rest of it on Saturday.
So we should table the motion then until Saturday.
Well, we can put
This is just for the lobby. This is just to serve it and be consumed in the lobby.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Got it.
Yeah, so that's the pending motion, and if there are no other questions or comments on the motion, all those in favor say aye.
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 There are no nays, so the motion carries. So, Merrill, we'll come back to this on Saturday, and feel free to participate at that time as well, and
Okay.
we'll keep moving on it, okay?
Okay, is that in the evening also on Saturday?
No, no. Well, this is a very active social select board, and Saturday is date night for all of us. No.
Movie night, you gotta go to the movies.
You know, it's a conflict of interest now, though.
We could put it at, the meeting's gonna be called to order at 9 a.m., so we could lead with this at the chair's
Yeah,
discretion.
we'll put this as quick as we can when the meeting convenes at 9 a.m. on Saturday.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. I'll see you then.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye now.
So, next on the agenda, town meeting TV update and budget request. Good evening.
Good evening.
The floor is yours.
Is Megan gonna join us?
Yes, so hello everyone, my name is Jordan Mitchell, co-director of operations for Town Meeting TV, and then joining online is Megan O'Rourke, CCTV projects director. So thanks for having us. I'm here to present what is our fiscal year 25, your fiscal year 26 budget, and kind of give an overview of the last fiscal year. So Town Meeting TV submits this report that you can find on Williston's website as part of our visit briefing the select board on Town Meeting TV operations, hearing from the community on how Town Meeting TV might better serve your needs, and requesting an annual municipal contribution for general Town Meeting TV operations. So I first want to review the programming that Town Meeting TV covered last fiscal year. So last year we produced and supported 1,519 programs for all of our member communities, and 377 of these programs was categorized as municipal coverage. For Williston, the contract stipulates production of 3 meetings a month and at least 1 general program per month. And last year we produced 46 select board and development review board meetings. Other general program we covered included the Williston Rotary Club Veterans Day observance and the Deb Beckett Memorial 5K run, which was actually covered by some of our summer interns. So we covered 128% of the budgeted number of municipal programs by covering 46 out of 36 expected meetings. We only covered 2 general programs last fiscal year, so we would encourage you to reach out as there's other things happening in the community. That might be a ribbon cutting ceremony or a new building opening, I guess it's the same thing, or maybe the library is hosting an interesting discussion. So if there's other things happening, you can reach out to us and we'd be happy to cover it. And one way you can reach out is through the Williston trustee, Helen Morgan Parmet. She couldn't join us tonight, but she's available. If you're not sure how to contact me, you can chat with her as well. And so now a little bit on funding. So Town Meeting TV, one more piece of programming. Also, Town Manager Eric Wells hosts a show with us called What's Up Williston a couple times a year, usually monthly, and goes over different updates happening in Williston, and we're always glad to have you in the studio. So that is something else, another way we interact with the Williston community. So funding. Town Meeting TV is funded in large part by cable subscribers of Comcast and Burlington Telecom, and then municipal contributions help to cover other operating costs. So this year for Williston, we are requesting an FY26 municipal contribution of $14,586 for general operating funds. This is a 5% increase from last year's contribution. So a little bit more about funding. CCTV has been aware of the changes that affect our funding sources. And so we're working to diversify our revenue sources really since the early 2000s. For example, we recognize that cable revenue has been declining over the last few years. Town Meeting TV tends to operate in a deficit, which is then covered through fundraising by CCTV Center for Media and Democracy. So we're planning ahead the next 5 years or so, looking at things such as legislative funding, fee-for-service work, and other municipal funding. You might recall this time last year when I was here, I was talking about the Vermont Access Network, which is the 23 public access centers in Vermont. We're asking the legislature for funding support, and that did pass, so we will now have $1 million in base funding split across all of us. And there's a goal to increase that to $2 million over the next 3 years in increments. We're also looking to expand our fee-for-service work through CCTV Productions. So if there are events that people want covered, not relating to municipal content, but just a video production company for hire. And then also supporting municipalities through recording and archiving of your content with Act 133, which we recognize is an unfunded mandate, but we're happy to support you in the ways that we can. So that is the funding piece. Lastly, I want to make sure to thank our staff. So tonight is our dedicated field producer, Andrew. Thank you for your contribution to democracy and public engagement. This work can't be done without our staff. So that is my piece, and I welcome any questions or comments you may have.
Questions from the board?
I think what you're doing is important. It just holds everyone accountable.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how we managed without having everything online. It's so convenient when you want to catch up on something or miss something, so super helpful.
Thank you.
And good job getting $1 million out of the legislature.
Other questions or comments?
Thank you for all you do.
Yep. So I saw Megan is participating remotely. Was she going to be making a?
She's mostly here for my support.
Okay. All right. Well, that wasn't neat.
But if there was any questions, especially, she's a lot more familiar with the base funding that we received. She's working with the Vermont Access Network and the Secretary of State's office to figure out how to increase it and what to do with it. So if there were questions on that, which other municipalities have had, she was there to answer those. Is there anything you do want to add, Megan, since you're here?
Thank you, Jordan. That was great. And thank you, Williston and Eric, for being good partners in this work. Appreciate it.
So what did other people ask you that I didn't think to ask?
Eugene.
Yeah, I know. Other people had questions about this, and I don't have any questions, so I missed something.
No, I think I've got it all. This is my 5th one doing this time, so I've gathered all the questions. Oh, someone asked about the van stuff. I'll put that in. So I think at this point I'm able to answer most of the questions. But yeah, thank you for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. 5%, good number.
Yeah, that's not bad.
When I used to arrive before, I used to know, I forget his name, Scott.
Scott,
The
Yeah.
guy. What's this gentleman's name, Andrew?
This is Andrew, yes.
So if you want to come in, I'll be able to say, hey, Andrew.
Yeah.
Gotta remember.
Thank you.
Jordan.
Thanks.
And thank you, Megan.
Yeah, thank you, Megan.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
All right.
So next on the agenda, fiscal year 26 draft operating and capital budget transmittal.
I know everyone's very excited for this, for the agenda, but if I could just, Bill Hinman's on Zoom, if the board would take up the errors and omissions to the grand list first.
Oh, sure.
So-
Yeah, okay,
So
let's
Bill's
do
have to hang out.
Okay, so errors and omissions for the 2024 grand list. Bill, are you there?
Yeah, Bill, I just gave you permission to talk. This is, sounds very formal with Zoom here, but this is something the select board gets every year. The listers and the select board can approve any errors and omissions to the grand list. It must be done before the end of December of each year. The staff's identified a handful in the materials transmitted this evening. I believe it adds a little bit of value to the grand list and a little bit of tax revenue. But Bill, if you're there, I'll turn it to you.
Sure, you guys can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So generally speaking, when we do errors and omissions, a few things come to light after we file the final grand list, and we're not able to make any changes to the final grand list once it's in the town clerk's hands. So we need the approval for the select board to make the changes. There was only a couple errors. One was in regards to a transfer, which a parcel is owned by two different people, and it was transferred into one person's name. And so a very small $2,800 assessment on one parcel needs to be merged for the other one. The other one was a mistake on my part for the Maple Tree Place settlement, where we placed the value. Let's see here. Or excuse me, Walmart. I'm sorry, not Maple Tree. Where we placed the value at $8,766,400 when it should have been $8,760,000, and I apologize for that. The other three are basically were brought to our attention. Two of those from the Shitten Solid Waste District, which are tax exempt as a municipality unless they're used for rental use. And two of those properties up until this past year were used for rental use and are no longer used for rental use, and therefore are tax exempt by statute. And then the other one was a revised inventory that we received from Vermont Transco, adding roughly 1.6 million to the value of the utility. And so that we did not know until about the first or second week of July. So again, we could not include it in our grand list without the approval of the select board.
Questions from the board? No. If there are no questions, there is a proposed motion.
I move to approve the corrections in the 2024 grand list as proposed by the listers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays, the motion carries. Okay,
Thank you guys, really appreciate it.
thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, take care.
Okay, now, the draft operating and capital budget transmittal.
Just give me wait.
We've waited long
Waited
enough.
long enough, so. So I'll start, I have some slides I'll go through with an overview this evening. But this starts the fiscal year 2026 budget process officially to the select board. So my role as town manager to transmit a budget to you every year as stated in the town charter. So you receive a brief overview from me this evening. The binders are not here just yet, but they are downstairs. So we've got a PDF assembled of the budget. I'll email that to the board first thing in the morning, and we should have the binders set tomorrow. It just becomes a nature of trying to print pages so they don't get, so they go in the dividers correctly and the page numbers work, and adding blank pages. So we didn't quite finish that up today, but we'll have binders, and I've set up meetings with the board members the next few days. So probably by the late morning or afternoon tomorrow, we'll have the binders together. So we'll plan to leave them in your mailboxes, or I can hand them to you at your meetings. I don't think I'll have yours ready for our 8 o'clock meeting tomorrow, Mike, but I'll pick it up later in the day. So I'll start there. So this coming Saturday is the board's dedicated budget review sessions. We'll meet from probably about 9 to 3 or so. That meeting will be warned tomorrow. You'll hear from all our department heads with overviews of their budgets, similar to what we've done last year with that structure. Then in early January, we'll have a public hearing on the budget on January 7th, and then dedicated time for the board for budget deliberations on a special meeting on January 14th, additional time on January 21st, and then an additional time on the 28th if needed. Target for the warning is that January 21st meeting, more times needed. We just have to have it warned 30 to 40 days before town meeting, which is March the 4th this year, I believe. So for that, I've handed out in front of you this evening, so you have it, the executive summary and transmittals for both the operating and the capital budget. I'll hit some slides this evening, and then we'll really get more in depth on Saturday, and then certainly as we get into the reviews in January. So I just need to share my screen. And I just want to thank Shirley for all her work on this budget as well, and the auditors are here this week as well, so it's there's a lot going on in the finance department right now, to say the least. So thanks to her and our team in the treasurer's office as well for their help in crunching a lot of numbers the last few days, as this was revised quite a few times in getting to the draft this evening. So similar to last year with my presentation here, we'll go over some general themes, some assumptions and policy levers, talk about the general fund, our fund balance and local option tax, ARPA funds, and then preview for you the next steps and policy decisions. So as I was just going over here's the timeline. Here we are tonight on the 3rd. We'll review on the 7th, take a break for the holidays, then get into the real numbers in January to come up with your town meeting warning. So some general themes from this budget. Similar to last year, this is proposing a level services budget and what the cost is to provide those services. There's some staffing capacity items for discussion in the central administration, talking about HR capacity similar to last year. That's the one difference in this budget on staffing wise. Wages and benefits drive expenses. And we've got about $10.5 million of our budget, or about 65% are wages and benefits for our staff to deliver services. Our health insurance cost increase is projected at $125,000 for 2025. As you may recall, in approving a switch to MVP healthcare from Blue Cross Blue Shield, this made the increase not quite as bad. It's still bad, but the Blue Cross increase was going to be $285,000. So by that adjustment by the board, we've realized some savings in our healthcare plan, even though there is an increase, and that's about a 14% of the expense increase overall is related to the healthcare costs for our staff. All employers are seeing it statewide with our statewide healthcare. Our total increase of just over $650,000 for wages and benefits. Thinking about this afternoon, I think that is pretty close to what Shirley had predicted back when we had a discussion in September about upcoming budgets. So playing out about how we thought it would for that major component of the budget. And then there's some elements that are carrying over from FY25 that are kind of a main theme here. You might recall after the budget failed at town meeting in May with the revised budget, decision was to use additional reserves or unassigned fund balance for revenue. That level of reserve for that purpose is decreased in this budget by about $170,000. So that funding needs to come from somewhere else, ultimately, and thinking about that as in the picture of how the reserve funds are utilized moving ahead. And then capital funding was also decreased in that revised budget, and added funds are in this budget with additional capital to make up for that component and try to put us on a good track moving ahead for especially equipment replacement costs from what the general fund can support year to year. So we'll go into that a bit more here, but those are some elements at play here, kind of a carryover from FY25 in addition to the ongoing cost to provide services. So we have to make some budget assumptions. You know, a budget is a spending plan. It's our fiscal policy of how to deliver town services. I'm trying to predict things that will start in June of 2025 to July of 2026. We have to do our best with information we have today, but things come up over the year. So this is, it's a plan, and it's the biggest piece of public policy you as a select board decide on each year. So grand list growth. Good news there is growth predicted by Bill Himmon, our assessor. You may recall last year that it was a flat grand list predicted. I think it grew a tiny bit when things were finalized, when the tax rate was set. We're predicting about a 0.5% growth. It's as always a conservative estimate. And if you look at what that would yield on the tax revenue, kind of how our tax base is growing, an extra $40,000 or so based on that projected growth. Our local options sales, rooms, and meals tax, we use the previous year's receipts history to help us try to predict this. It's challenging. It's always a look back, not a look forward. So we try to factor in this prediction the best we can. We're putting a 1.5% increase. We look back at where we ended FY24, where we've kind of benchmarked FY25. We've seen the increase overall decrease the last couple of years. So I think it went up about 2.5% in the last year. So we're being conservative with 1.5%. You may recall last year we increased this quite a bit, about $500,000 to kind of true it up with what we'd seen in recent years. So want to see how that plays out in FY25. The first quarter collected just over $1 million in these receipts. We budgeted about 4.1 for the year. So we want to see how this continues to play out and overall, and especially the second quarter right now with the holiday season kind of dictates a lot of where this will end up at the end of the year. So we've built a small increase there. And then the fund balance, as mentioned, with the reserves and the ARPA funds, some offsets to consider assisting in balancing the budget, continuing with phased down stepped approach and thinking of the outlying years here as well.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the last one, you mentioned the receipts, on the utilizing previous year receipts. We don't actually see what like Walmart, for example, is generating for sales.
Right, yeah, no, good question. That's essentially what the receipt of revenue is, but yeah, not on a store-by-store basis, just an overall amount we get from the state tax department.
Thank you.
So this process starts over the summer, how we put our town budget draft together to transmit to you, to get to the manager's draft budget. So I asked department heads to look at a level services budget again this year. If there's newer or expanded services, to make those as a separate request to me. This budget reflects that level service level. That's a little redundant there. Except for growing some capacity in our central administration with human resources. You'll see in your transmittal a lot of what I did is to take a look at potential areas to trim back in the budget and having to make some tough decisions in the proposal for you to think about with outside allocations this year for agencies that the town provides funding to and reserve funds as well. You'll see those outlined in the transmittal. Identifies potentially about $95,000 that I've trimmed initially with those, but those are policy decisions for you to make in the end. And it's a challenging year, and all organizations are feeling that right now and thinking how that's balanced out for us. You'll see that in more detail, and we'll go into it more as we get to that section of the budget. So here's the bird's eye view of the bottom line, where this draft has about a 5.9% expense increase. It's, as we mentioned, additional tax revenue to offset that, with local option tax revenue increasing about $50,000. Other revenue netting out lower as we decrease reliance on the fund balance use this next year. Estimate for a starting tax rate for discussion is about $39 more per $100,000 of value. For that median assessed home in town, that's about $120 for the year, or just under $10 a month. Again, I know tax rates are really a focal point of discussion statewide right now, rightfully so, especially with the education tax rate. And the overall municipal services tax rate in town makes up about 15% of a property owner's tax bill. The other 85% is generally the education tax. The town is required by statute to collect all property taxes, town and education fund, and transfer those to the state tax department annually. Tax rates are set after the grand list is finalized, usually in June by the select board once that growth is realized. but we use it now as a starting point with thinking about revenue and how to raise revenue and how the board wants to shape that balanced budget with the different tools you have at your disposal for the revenue side. So these overall budget factors, the payroll and benefits cost, I forgot to finish my bullet point here. As I mentioned, the increase for the payroll and benefits was just over $650,000. The capital fund transfer from the general fund, an increase of just over $180,000. Trying to build back that general fund allocation after some of the deferral decisions from last May on the revised budget. And also, some news to be thinking downstream as we think about FY27 a year from now. We're going to start seeing a decent chunk of our bonds maturing that we've had here over the last 20 years. The first of 3 series of bonds for the public safety buildings the last debt payment will be made in FY26. There's 2 other series that will mature a couple of years from now. But between that bond maturing and the ambulance bond and the sidewalk bond from about 20 years ago, between FY26 and FY27, the debt service payments by the town are going to decrease $280,000. With the caveat that's assuming not adding any new debt with either of those fiscal years either. As the town thinks of future large-scale capital needs, there is this debt rolling off to be replaced potentially with some new debt in either a partial or full manner. But that's not an FY26 number, but it's showing you some of these budget pressures on the expense side. That's a piece that will be rolling off in FY27 a year from now. As I mentioned, the use of the unassigned fund balance reserves, the proposal is decreasing that use by about $170,000, bringing it back to a $500,000 level, and thinking about staying in your policy if you choose to the acceptable range for the fund balance. I'll get to that in a minute with a different slide. So something I've done the last few years is just kind of put in perspective where Williston is in terms of a municipal tax rate in Chittenden County. And I took it a little different this year. We've typically been the second lowest rate in the county, but looking at this among other communities in Chittenden County that I'm calling a full service municipality, those that offer full public safety of police, fire, EMS, whether in-house or contracting, highway departments. So some towns are much smaller and don't have that level of service. So trying to look with some of the larger communities and see kind of where our municipal tax rate is compared to them. And, in many parts due to our local option sales tax is keeping that rate the lowest among these communities in the county. Look at the FY25 rates. They go as high as 98.5 cents in Essex Junction to our current tax rate of 35.5 cents in Williston.
How does the current CPI affect that? Does that affect that at all?
No, but it dependent on where the select board lands for the amount of money to raise in property taxes. So the CPI factors into the expense side of the budget, but for the actual tax rate, that's up to you and how you decide to what amount of money you want to raise from taxes. The rate would yield the amount of tax revenue based on the grand list, based on the amount you want to raise.
Who'd you drop off this list besides Charlotte, St. George?
I
Anybody
think
else?
Underhill, Jericho, Charlotte. Let's see. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the question, Jeannie?
Eric was saying that on this, usually we have all the towns in Chittenden County, and he dropped off some that don't have full service. They don't have a fire department. They don't have a police department. So it's not really a fair comparison. And I was just wondering who besides St. George and Charlotte was dropped off. So Jericho and Underhill.
Yeah, and they have a volunteer fire department up there, but they don't have a police department. So I try to ones that have kind of access to all those services.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, our local options tax, we project a little over $4 million. Currently, our revenue is offsetting what we would need to otherwise raise in property taxes by 19.25 cents. Looking at this model in the budget. So 1 cent on our tax rate or grand list with a half cent growth is estimated to be about $216,000 for every cent on the tax rate. So without that, to raise the same amount of money, property taxes would need to be over 19 cents higher in town. So as mentioned, the unassigned fund balance, kind of serving as a rainy day fund for the town. Select board policy calls for it to be between 10 and 20% of the operating budget. Shirley works to kind of estimate this looking ahead. We have to make assumptions as we're closing fiscal year 2024. We have things budgeted to use in FY25 to try to estimate where we're going to end FY25, to then say, okay, if we end up spending all this each year in the budget, including what's in this draft for FY26, where would this be at the end of FY26? So as Shirley's working through closing FY24, we're putting in this model using the full amount of money that's been allocated there, but in reality, we anticipate that that's not going to need to be used in full. There'd be a few $100,000 most likely that aren't ended up being used that will fall back to this. Well, once we have the audit and the complete, we can advise the board on that number, and this can adjust a little bit.
Wait, so that's the very top line you're saying could be a little higher?
The very top line could be a little higher. And then we won't know 25 till we're done. But it gives you kind of a scenario if, say, we needed to use everything as budgeted, where would we be at the end of FY 26? And that estimate would be just over 2 million, or with that use ratio in the select board's policy about 13%. When we did this exercise last budget year, we estimated we'd be about 15% at the end of FY 24. That's looking like it'll be more like 17%. So there's usually, being conservative there, hopefully it's a little bit higher than we forecast right now. But it gives you an idea of, we've talked about needing to be aware of how much of that is used for tax reduction year to year, and being mindful for the board to decide what amount to program year to year, and about what that looks like moving forward.
I think that's very good news for the town. Mm-hmm. Better than a lot of home budgets.
Yeah, it's good, keeping that money there, but more of it needs to be used every year towards the budget, then it's going to get drawn down rather quickly, and then it's going to have to be made up some way to balance the budget year to year, and then depleting a reserve, then you don't have a reserve for issues that come up. I mentioned ARPA funds, and then we're now referring to those community projects funds. Just to recap, Williston received $3 million of these federal funds. We claimed the lost revenue exemption allowed use for general government expenses with a few exceptions. And then we've moved these into a community projects fund that the select board's been allocating the last few years as part of our capital budgeting, as part of a little bit towards our operating fund revenue, and then most recently some other projects from the priority list of the board. This proposal, we've stepped down the use and operating revenue each of the last 4 years. We started with 300,000, went to 150, went to 75 in FY25, and I built in one more step down to 50 in balancing this budget. We didn't end up needing to use the full amounts allocated year to year, so we were able to roll that back into the community projects funds.
So Alec, putting that 50,000 in the proposed budget didn't reduce that number we've been working with on our projects list, because you hadn't applied the underruns yet to that number. Exactly.
What you saw a few weeks ago, we haven't changed that at all. Once the audit's complete, we'll know if we can increase that ceiling a little bit based on that final number. I built in, you'll see in capital, some of the projects, especially on your priority list, like the park pavilion and the conservation projects that you have on your priority list, just to put them in the capital budget, just to continue that dialogue as an option that way. And then I put some in towards other things, some vehicle replacements, to try to increase those accounts allocations, keep them at a level we want them. Some not quite all the way, but trying to get more towards the general fund each year. I couldn't do it all at once, but having a model where those equipment replacements are funded year to year through the general fund, so we know what we need to put in those sinking funds, and then thinking about more of the one-time money with using some fund balance via other means of revenue towards these more standalone projects. One thing I put in is some investment in our police and fire station with some of the ARPA money too. Fire station has a project identified where we have some issues with the flashing and the gutters and the siding there. So I put in some money from those community projects funds to cover that. Some concerns with some water and buildings don't mix. So I'm suggesting that is a project we advance in the short term. So it's me kind of high-level policy considerations that you're faced with over the next 2 months. These are the levers you can pull during your review process. Ultimately, the general fund expenses, the different line items, the allocations, property taxes, amount to raise, and the estimated tax rate to set, use of reserves and fund balance, use of these community projects or ARPA funds for capital needs, and operating offset operating funds for the general fund. I'm getting a little tired this evening. Presentation. Yeah, and your work moving ahead will be where to set this budget. It's, you know, the manager proposes a starting point for you, but it's far from the finish line. So it's your budget for the community, and staff will be here to support you and working through where you want to land for town meeting. That is my overview for this evening.
Questions from the board? It's going to be a fun 2 months.
Matt's prediction of commercial development in the town, you know, the grand list going down, I think is very real. I think it's something we're going to see with the internet sales and everything else that's going on.
Yep.
And so if the board has time before Saturday, I'd suggest reading the transmittal. Kind of gives more detail from what I provided this evening. It also has a summary of a line-by-line breakdown of everything, similar to the format I put together for you the last few years. We will have the binder set, and that will have a detailed note on every line item for every department, how every dollar's accounted for in this draft budget. So we'll have that together the next day for you as well. My plan is to ask department heads to provide just a high-level overview of their budgets as usual, not a line by line, but hit kind of larger variances and give the board an update on delivering services in their departments, some of the pressures they're feeling, and how the costs reflect that cost to provide those services. I think that's what I've teed up for you.
The binders will be ready before Saturday, or?
Yep, we should have them ready tomorrow.
Okay, so we can drop by?
Yep.
So do we have any, are we in negotiations on anything that would affect 26?
Yep, the police union contract expires on June 30th of 25, so there'll be a new police union contract for FY26.
Okay. I assume that'd be an executive session thing, just to understand what you put in the budget, because you must have put something in the budget, I assume.
Yeah, that's something we can talk as those negotiations get undergoing.
Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned the HR position. Are there, if anybody else needed, if we wanted to move forward with the police, the greater plan we have for the police department or something, that would be like a standalone, like we did last year, like a standalone decision for us to see if we could fit it in.
Yeah, for the purposes of this draft, I included, I view kind of everything as a top personnel priority, that the human resources based position. So for discussion, I've put that into this proposal. It's baked into this number. But anything beyond, other positions beyond that would be those adds otherwise. Certainly recognizing the needs of the police department as well. Continuing to add police staff at a rate over the next few years. But I haven't built anything into this initial draft, just where we were landing on the bottom line. And those pressures on the tax rate, considering the reserve funds and the capital needs and on the expense side as well.
I would just like to see them though, because I think we could, especially if we have a step down in FY27, if, I could see some cost shifting on capital or something out to FY27 if we really felt it was important to keep moving forward on the police department strategy. So I hate to ask people to give us their, I don't want to say wish list, but give us their really high needs things and then just say, but 6% is already pretty high, so never mind. But something that important that we have been talking about would be good to at least have in front of us to think about.
Yeah, I know you'll see at the end of my transmittal, I have a section on service enhancements, and I speak to a couple different areas like that in there. we could certainly.
'Cause I think we
provide
had a
more.
position in the police department we pulled back last year, right?
Yeah, so the,
We
it's a,
funded half of a full year one, and then there was another one.
yeah, we were looking for the second lieutenant position that we, was pulled out completely and thinking about building out that second unit. We ended up with half of the 18th sworn position that will come into effect in January to then be able to move someone into the detective role. So we also see now funding that position for a full year. That's
Right.
adding to the
Right.
police department expense
Right,
coming up.
But that's not a decision, because we've already made that decision, it's just an impact.
Yeah, exactly.
But the other position would be a decision that would.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I know the board has tasked me with an implementation plan for the Baker plan, Baker report, and I haven't put that flushed out completely as I saw where the budget was going this year and developing it. So that's still on my priority list for this fiscal year, but just so the board's aware, I wasn't at a place where I wanted to build that out completely, just knowing the fiscal pressures right now. So that's part of something we'll need to be discussing here ongoing over these next several months as well.
Other initial comments?
I'm saving them all up for Saturday.
For the next couple of days.
I know.
If,
3 days to work on.
If not, then the next item would be the manager's report. All right.
So as a reminder, if you're talking about Saturday select board meeting for the budget review, I'll get the agenda out tomorrow. Similar as last year, I think I just used kind of the template we did for meeting times and meeting when the department heads if they had any conflicts. But the meeting will start at 9 o'clock. I built in a little time for a lunch break. If things go a little quicker, I put kind of the stuff that Shirley and I present towards the end of the day so we can take that up earlier. And whatever time the board needs, staff will be here to support all the time you need for that. I mentioned a couple meetings ago, but I've got the physical copy, the Q1 local option tax report. I also emailed that out to the board the other day. That's with your materials. We talked last meeting about a legislative breakfast. I heard back from most people in our delegation, and they certainly were interested and appreciated the invite. And looking at people's availability, it looks like January will probably work best. Two dates that lined up were possibly the 6th or the 27th. Thought I have is maybe the 27th might be a little better, as opposed to coming right back from the holidays, and there might be some interesting conversations the first month of the session, especially with education funding to have a dialogue about. So I'll see what the board's thoughts were for Monday, January 27th for that.
The governor's budget will be out, I think, that week, so.
Okay.
Good time to do it.
When I think of the legislators, I think it's important to know whether they vote yay or nay, but also more important on what types of bills that they wish to, submit.
Yeah, what their priorities are versus, what, we may want to influence their priorities and what they're.
What do we need as a select board, for the legislators to maybe do, Like, I'd like to know about the local options tax.
About it changing?
The landlord knows what they make, but we don't.
Oh.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
So is it the 27th?
27th sounds good.
Does that sound good to people?
Yeah.
What I'll probably do is bring you kind of some policy points for discussion for your meeting on the 21st to prep for that. So I'll work on that before that meeting.
But just maybe brainstorm on things that we'd like to ask them.
Yeah, it might, if it's on an agenda for us to think about a little bit.
Well, the way that breakfast has worked when we did do it in the past is that somebody basically acts as an MC, and the legislators will make a little bit of a statement, and then people will ask questions as they go forward. So.
Yeah, our breakfast at the school district, we would tend to come with a list of things we needed and talk at them a lot, so.
Yeah.
Is this open to the public as well, or is this just?
Yep, it's a meeting of the public body, so it's open to the public. We've typically invited chairs from boards and commissions. If the select board wants me to extend an invitation to those individuals as well, however you'd like to use the time.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Harry's You've been on both sides before.
I have.
At the same time?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't have to MC when I was on the docket as well.
Yeah, it might be interesting to invite our elected school board members to come to. I mean, I don't think they would, when I was invited to yours, because they're going to have their own, but it would be interesting to have them at the table if there's a lot of education funding things coming up. They may have an opinion that they would like us to be aware of.
I assume Bridget was included in that.
Track down her email address.
Yes, okay, I could have shared it, but yeah, okay, good.
Then finally, just some staff news. We've hired a new police officer, Brittany Lewis. She's going to be joining us this month. Another fully certified officer. We've hired 3 fully certified officers the last couple of months.
Nice.
So that will get our personnel up to 16 of 17 sworn, and with the addition of the 18th capacity starting at the turn of the year, our focus is going to be to hopefully get those 2 vacancies filled, but we'll be looking to move someone in the detective role, starting that process after the turn of the year. I think is Chief Foley's plan. So we're hopeful to, get a couple more people hired, and if we need to get someone in the police academy, get that lined up. But we've hired some great people to join our team, and I know they're doing well and enjoying their work here, supporting our agency in our town. And then bittersweet news, our conservation planner, Andrew Plum, is going to be wrapping up his service on Friday. He's got some new opportunity. He'll be moving south of us and in New England, but Andrew's done a great job as our planning technician and then our conservation planner for over the past year. So we're going to send him off with a little bit of a staff gathering coming up Thursday, and wish him the very well in his future endeavors. He's got a bright career ahead of him. And that's all I have for manager's report.
Is there any other business?
One other liquor license. It's a renewal for Railroad in Maine. These are kind of come off cycle now because they're all on the date your license was approved, not at the turn of, I think it was May 1st is the way they used to do it. Yep. So they got this renewal back when they opened a couple years ago, so this has been their cycle. So the request is to renew a first and third class for license for Railroad in Maine.
Any issues staff knows of?
No, we haven't received any.
When did they?
They're
file
closing.
for that? They're closing.
Yeah.
They came in today. To drop it
Okay,
off.
okay,
They wanted to make sure it was covered for the month.
okay, good.
So they're not closing.
They are.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Not yet.
But they need the license renewed in order to get them to where they do close.
Oh,
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No nays, it passes. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Are there any additional or final thoughts from items from tonight's meeting? And hearing none, then I will declare that we are adjourned.
so Greta, was railroading